Glenn, say liar, liar, pants on fire. If someone breaks a promise or tells a lie, their pants are supposed to catch on fire, I said, wondering afterwards if I had gone a bit overboard. But lessons taught in childhood are that important. Perhaps a bit of exaggeration in my admonition would have a greater impact. It's all for Glenn's sake, after all. However, Glenn's face turned red with anger at what I said. At first, I thought it was just typical defiance, but it was something else. Why don't Mom's pants catch on fire, then? Is Mom a liar too? Why would only my pants catch on fire? Glenn, how dare you speak to me like that? Even though I had a rough past, I couldn't overlook such disrespect towards a parent. Raising my voice instinctively, Glenn, not wanting to be outdone, barked back, tears nearly in his eyes. It's true. Mom is a liar. So, it's only fair if Mom's pants catch on fire too. I'm not lying. As he yelled, he became overwhelmed with emotion. Eventually, he burst into tears, shouting, I hate Grandma. She's stupid. This left me at a loss. What should I do? As I panicked, uncharacteristically unsure of myself, I heard rapid footsteps from behind. I finally caught up. It seems she was worried and had followed me. My daughter Emerson entered the living room, freezing for a moment at the sight. A crying grandson. And a flustered grandma. To an outsider unaware of the circumstances, it was clear who the villain was. Rushing to explain, I said, It's a misunderstanding. But seriously, calling your parent a liar isn't right, is it? Oh, is that so? Apparently, Emerson hadn't heard the exchange. Stunned, Emerson listened as I explained everything without omission. After hearing it all, Emerson clapped her hands, seemingly convinced. I see. But it seems like Glenn isn't exactly lying, is he? Then, squatting down like me but with a calm demeanor unlike mine, she spoke gently to Glenn. Hey, Glenn. There must be a reason you called your mom a liar, right? A reason. Yes, a reason. Might be hard to explain reason to someone in the early grades. Can you tell me, Glenn, why you think Mom is a liar? Glenn fell silent for a moment but soon said, Wait here, and ran off somewhere. After a while, he returned, holding something that looked like a crumpled piece of paper. My name is Mahalia. I'm a self-employed owner of a small delivery service. I was blessed with 2 children by my husband, who sadly passed away in a traffic accident 25 years ago. When my eldest son, Connolly, was 6 and my daughter, Emerson, was 3. I was determined to make sure that the prejudice of being raised by a single mother wouldn't lead them to feel deprived in any way. After my husband's death, I worked tirelessly, continuing to run the delivery service he left behind. As someone who lost their husband in a traffic accident, it's an ironic twist of fate, but maybe it's because they grew up watching my struggles, or perhaps they had their own childlike thoughts about it. Connolly and Emerson never complained about our situation. Instead, they took the initiative to help me out from a young age. In elementary school, they would take on all the household chores I couldn't manage, and by middle school, they were sorting packages within their capabilities. By the time they were in high school, Connolly had decided to pursue a career with a national delivery company after graduation, while Emerson acquired accounting skills during her high school years. Connolly aimed to learn the know-how to stabilize my business, and Emerson intended to assist in managing my company after her graduation. Honestly, as a parent, I had hoped they would graduate from college and pursue their futures without worrying about my circumstances. But I can't say I'm not delighted by their sentiments, and I gratefully accepted their kindness. Despite their unity, the 2 actually have opposite personalities. Connolly is quiet and serious, much like my husband, while Emerson is spirited and assertive, resembling me. Yet, living under the same roof of our family home, their contrasting personalities might have played a part in keeping their sibling relationship strong to this day. Beyond gender and personality, there's another difference between them. Marital status. A few years after joining his current company, Connolly married a woman named Ashley whom he met through work, and 2 years later, they were blessed with a child. A son who looks just like Connolly, named Glenn. With the whole family living in the family home, Ashley moved in with us from the beginning of her marriage, and the arrival of Glenn made our home even livelier. Ashley, now a part of our family, is a reserved and considerate woman, a stark contrast to myself and Emerson. This difference initially caused quite a bit of confusion. It would be more accurate to say I didn't know how to interact with her. However, that feeling of awkwardness quickly dissipated because she took initiative in household chores and worked hard. Ashley and Emerson call each other by nicknames and get along well. I secretly hoped Emerson would start to desire marriage after seeing her brother's marriage and the birth of her nephew, but I remember her contradictory statement while bouncing little Glenn on her knee.
Maybe marriage isn't for me. Our life seems better suited to working, and besides, I don't know how to deal with kids.
Even though she says she doesn't know how to interact with them, the fact remains that Emerson takes care of Glenn whenever Ashley or I are busy, and Glenn is particularly fond of Emerson. Our family, seemingly without troubles and with good relationships, appeared to be sailing smoothly. However, none of us, except perhaps the person who caused it, could have imagined that cracks would begin to appear in our peace. It was around the time Glenn started elementary school. Suddenly, Ashley expressed a desire to return to work. Probably, she planned to go back once Glenn, who had been a toddler requiring constant attention, became a somewhat more independent elementary school student. Both Emerson and I, being work-oriented, understood her desire to work. We sent her off with our blessings. Initially, I thought she would opt for a part-time job, but Ashley chose full-time employment. Moreover, her hours were irregular, sometimes returning late at night or early in the morning. Ashley had been the one to take the lead on household chores, but with her working, Emerson and I had to take over those responsibilities. Especially for me, having more free time compared to when I was raising children, I took the initiative in taking care of Glenn. I wonder if Ashley is okay. Emerson would sometimes express concern for her brother's family. Connolly often spends days away from home as a long-haul driver, and Ashley's work hours are irregular. Even though we're taking care of the household chores and looking after Glenn, there's probably worry about whether these factors might cause a rift in the family dynamics.
It'll be fine. Ashley is a good wife, and she does come home, after all.
That's true, but... Even though Emerson's response was vague, I understood what she was implying. She suspected Ashley might be having an affair.
Don't worry. Living with in-laws can be stressful, and she's probably just venting at work. I wouldn't know, though, having never experienced it myself.
I tried to laugh it off, but it seemed Emerson's suspicions didn't clear up. She gave a non-committal, maybe, in a way that was unlike her. Emerson's bad feeling turned out to be true a few weeks later, in an unexpected revelation. That day was the start of Connolly's month-long business trip out of state, a trip that had been planned in advance. Coincidentally, Ashley also had a work trip scheduled for 2 nights and 3 days starting the same day. Emerson was openly suspicious, but I thought it was just a coincidence and didn't worry too much about it. In fact, I was more concerned about Glenn, since it was the first time both parents would be gone for such a long period. However, my worries were unfounded. Glenn woke up at his usual time, ate breakfast as usual, and went to school as if nothing had changed, despite his parents' absence. He would come home, throw his bag down, and then go out to play with friends until the evening, maintaining his usual routine. Just as I was feeling relieved about this, something odd happened. I find this strange. I noticed it while preparing dinner. There was something slightly off about the contents of the refrigerator. Something is missing. I looked around and realized what it was. There was only one pudding left from the ones we received from a client the day before yesterday. When I put them in the fridge, I told Emerson and Glenn.
2 each, but you can only have 1 during snack time each day.
Despite this, of the 8 puddings we chilled, only 1 remained. Since Emerson, Glenn, and I each had ours during snack time yesterday and today, the 2 that were supposed to be left were for Ashley. It's worth mentioning that Connolly, who dislikes sweets and wasn't counted due to the expiration date issue, wasn't considered in this equation.
Mom? What's going on? You're leaving the fridge open. That's a waste of electricity, isn't it?
Just then, Emerson appeared in the kitchen. A secret thought crossed my mind, something like the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime, a cliché from detective dramas. Given Emerson's demeanor, it seemed unlikely she was the culprit. If she were, she'd better pursue a career in acting rather than accounting. Just checking something. But this didn't fully clear Emerson of suspicion. Yet, feeling somewhat like a detective myself, I couldn't show my hand just yet and closed the fridge as if nothing had happened. Watching her mother's behavior with suspicion, Emerson uttered a disinterested, "Huh," as if she had lost interest. Likely she had come for a drink in the first place. She opened the fridge door that had just been closed. But she seemed to notice the oddity too and quickly closed it again. "Hey, Mom. Did you by any chance eat Ashley's pudding?" "Of course not." I raised my voice, forgetting for a moment that I had even suspected Emerson. With her eyebrows furrowed, Emerson seemed to have only meant it as a check.
"No need to get so defensive. I was just asking."
"Right, sorry. But that means..." This behavior suggested Emerson likely wasn't our culprit. That left only one possible suspect. At that moment, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, there was Glenn, peeking out from behind something. Politely enough, he had a bit of pudding residue at the corner of his mouth, which hadn't been there when snack time ended. Our eyes met. As soon as our gazes crossed, Glenn dashed off like a scared rabbit. Convinced I had found the perpetrator, I immediately gave chase.
"Hey, Glenn! Wait up!"
What ensued was a chase. But it was ultimately a child against an adult. Soon, the little escapee was cornered in a corner of the living room.
"Glenn, don't you have something to say before you try to run?"
Glenn was silent, looking for an escape but finding none.
"Glenn, you ate Mom's pudding, didn't you?" "I did not,"
he denied fervently, unaware of the incontrovertible evidence on his face.
"Don't lie. You've got pudding on your mouth."
In a panic, he tried to wipe away the evidence. Such honest reactions are, perhaps, characteristic of children. But that didn't mean it was excusable. I squatted down to look Glenn in the eye, making as scary a face as possible without making him cry, and admonished him.
"Glenn, say liar, liar, pants on fire. If you break promises or tell lies, everyone's pants will catch on fire,"
I said, thinking afterwards maybe I had gone a bit too far. But I've heard that lessons in childhood are important. Perhaps a bit of exaggeration might have a bigger impact. It's all for Glenn's sake. However, for some reason, Glenn's face turned red with anger. I thought it was just typical defiance at first, but it wasn't.
"Then why don't Mom's pants catch on fire? Is Mom a liar too? Why should only my pants catch on fire?"
"Glenn, how dare you speak to your parent like that?" Even for someone with my past, I couldn't overlook such disrespect towards a parent. Raising my voice unintentionally, Glenn, not wanting to be outdone, barked back with tears nearly in his eyes.
"It's true. Mom is a liar. So, it only makes sense if Mom's pants catch on fire too. I'm not lying."
As he yelled, he became overwhelmed with emotion. Eventually, he burst into tears, shouting,
"I hate Grandma. She's stupid."
"Look what you've done, Mom, you've made Glenn cry." It seems Emerson was concerned and had followed. Entering the living room with a teasing tone, Emerson caught up.
"It's a misunderstanding. But really, calling your parent a liar isn't exactly nice, is it?"
"True.
But it seems like Glenn isn't exactly lying either, is he?"
Squatting down like me, but in a calmer manner, she gently addressed Glenn.
"Hey, Glenn. There must be a reason you called Ashley Mom a liar, right?"
"A reason?"
"Yes, a reason." Might be hard to explain reason to someone in the early grades. Can you tell us, Glenn, why you think Mom is a liar, to me or Grandma?"
After a moment of silence, Glenn quickly said, "Wait here," and ran off. He returned after a while, holding something that looked like a crumpled piece of paper.
"What's that?"
At first glance, it looked like nothing more than trash. Still half crying, Glenn carefully unfolded it, and what appeared made us even more puzzled.
"Is this Ashley's work schedule?"
Yes, it was indeed Ashley's genuine work schedule. From last month. How this connected to being called a liar wasn't immediately clear.
"Wait a second. Could this mean..."
Emerson seemed to realize something right away. And Glenn, understanding that his message had been conveyed, nodded vigorously several times. Mom, these red days marked off were when you said you were going to work. These are days off, right? Days off mean no work, right?
That's right. You figured it out, Glenn.
Emerson hugged a still nearly tearful Glenn tightly. Calmed by the embrace, Glenn smiled slightly in her arms. I stood there, stunned, as if left behind. No, maybe my brain was refusing to comprehend. Continuing over Emerson's shoulder, Glenn spoke. Grandma, I'm not lying, okay? Sometimes Mom talks on the phone with someone I don't know and then goes out to meet them. I overheard it. Even this business trip, she packed her bag with lots of pretty clothes and seemed really excited.
Mom, this. Damn, just as Emerson predicted. I guess I still have a lot to learn.
Frustrated, I instinctively cradled my head in my hands. Having taken over as the manager in place of my husband and determined not to be underestimated because I'm a woman, I thought I had honed my ability to judge people over decades. But it seems Ashley was the clever one this time. Even if Ashley is having an affair as Glenn suggests, there's honestly nothing we can do about it now. The only evidence we have is the word of young Glenn. If it's chalked up to a child's misunderstanding, that's the end of it. Without definitive evidence that leaves no room for denial, they could easily slip away. And if we're wrong, they might hide their tracks even more cleverly from now on. As I pondered what to do, Emerson's phone rang.
Emerson, your phone.
It's okay. That sound means I got a message. But excuse me for a sec. After lightly patting Glenn on the back, she stood up. Pulling out her mobile phone from her pocket, it seemed to be good news for Emerson. A sly smile crossed her face.
What's with that creepy grin?
Looks like our prey got caught in a net. She displayed a grin not suitable for a child to see but ensured Glenn couldn't see the mobile phone's screen. She turned towards me. Again, I found myself cradling my head. Emerson, when did you start planning this?
Well, when indeed. But more importantly, Mom, call bro. Ask him to come back as soon as possible, before Ashley returns.
Yeah. You sure are demanding. Sighing for what felt like the umpteenth time, I activated my mobile phone. It felt wrong to disturb work for this, but it was a crisis for my son's family. Shaking off the hesitation, I dialed Connolly's number. That night, an unseasonably heavy rain poured down as if foreshadowing the difficult times ahead. Occasional thunder rumbled in the distance, and every time it sounded, Connolly alternately looked towards the ceiling, accurately the door leading to the upstairs hallway and stairs. Glenn was supposed to be sleeping in his room upstairs. He was probably worried that Glenn might be scared of the thunder. The glances towards the hallway were surely out of concern for Ashley's safety, who was due to return today. Maybe I should go pick her up. This conversation was repeated several times. With the heavy rain, there was concern that buses might be halted. Too severe for her to make it back on her own. Driven by such concerns, Connolly repeatedly tried to go to the nearest bus stop to pick up Ashley. But Emerson and I desperately stopped him.
If you go to pick her up now, everything will be over. Plus, if Ashley was really in trouble, she'd at least send a message, I argued. Exactly. Bro, why did you rush back from work if not for this? Emerson added.
It's not like I abandoned anything. I made sure to finish up what I could before coming back, Connolly defended himself. This exchange was repeated numerous times. Amidst the sound of the rain, it seemed like we heard the front door unlocking. Instantly, the three of us fell silent. Listening closely, the sound of the door opening was followed immediately by Ashley's voice saying,
I'm home.
Emerson signaled with her eyes. I'll go. Pretending to be the concerned sister rushing out to greet Ashley, who had returned in the heavy downpour.
Welcome back, Ashley. You're soaked, aren't you? Here, take this towel.
Thanks, Emerson. I thought I'd be okay, but my umbrella didn't help much. My carry-on got wet too. Can I just leave it in the entrance for now?
No problem. If we prioritize the carry-on and you catch a cold, I'll get scolded by bro.
Laughter was heard. It hardly sounded like a conversation between those about to confront and be confronted. Connolly next to me still looked anxious. I had briefly explained the situation over the phone at that time. And Emerson had shown him the thing she had obtained. So, he should know what's about to happen. But understandably, he was anxious. Their voices, almost mocking Connolly's state of mind, approached the living room. As the door connecting the hallway and the living room opened.
Hello!
Welcome back, Ashley. Welcome back, Mom. We greeted Ashley as neutrally as possible, trying to hide any emotion in our voices. Perhaps surprised by my presence and Connolly, who wasn't supposed to be back yet. Her face stiffened in shock. But soon, she put on a forced smile.
I'm back, Mahalia. Wow, this rain is terrible. Did Connolly come back because of the rain, too?
Ashley acted as if nothing was amiss, unaware that everyone else knew everything. Ashley, there's something I need to confirm. You were on a business trip, right? Ashley's hand, holding the towel, paused momentarily, but then resumed. What are you talking about, Connolly? Are you and Mahalia possibly misunderstanding me for cheating? She waved her hand in denial, pretending nothing happened. Unable to tolerate such obvious acting any longer, Emerson behind Ashley presented her mobile phone.
Can you still keep up this act after seeing this, Ashley?
Ashley's face turned pale. Displayed was a single image. Though taken from a distance and likely zoomed in, the quality was clear thanks to modern technology. It unmistakably showed Ashley arm in arm with an unfamiliar man, looking intimate.
Sorry, but something was off with your behavior, Ashley, so I asked someone from another delivery service to keep an eye out. You said you didn't have any brothers, right? Even if that was your dad, he looks way too young and nothing like you. So, Ashley, who is this man?
Who? He's a colleague from work.
A colleague? Do married people these days link arms with their colleagues and do this and that?
With deliberate exaggeration, ensuring Ashley couldn't escape, Emerson started sliding through the photos one after another. What appeared next were scenes of the two walking through bustling streets, looking very much like a couple. Some photos even captured them kissing without concern for onlookers or entering what appeared to be a hotel on a different day.
See, here's the evidence. Wouldn't it be better to just come clean?
Emerson pressed Ashley with a look that seemed devilishly delighted at having found her toy. I couldn't help but wonder whom she had taken after at that moment.
Shut up, you single woman!
With those harsh words, Ashley shrugged off Emerson's arm. Ashley's sudden change caught Connolly, Emerson, and even me by surprise, freezing us in shock for a moment.
Yeah, you're right. I was having an affair. Are you happy now?
Ashley? Let's calm down, okay?
Calm down? What are you talking about, you worthless husband? I married you for your money. And I never wanted kids, but you went and screwed that up too. What are you going to do about it, huh?
The slap resounded as loudly as the rain, leaving a silence dominated only by the downpour. My palm throbbed with delayed pain. When was the last time I had slapped someone? Perhaps when Connolly or Emerson was young? Or even earlier? But that didn't matter now.
Enough of this, you're embarrassing yourself.
I quietly observed Ashley, who was touching her slapped cheek. In her shocked eyes, my stern gaze was reflected sharply.
You married for the money? Marriage isn't something you trivialize. It's about wanting to spend your life with someone, regardless of their income. If you love money so much, marry it. Is your affair partner richer than Connolly? Then go, marry him right now.
Snorting, it seems Ashley recovered from the shock of being slapped. She gritted her teeth and glared at us with all her might. But to me, this was nothing more than a puppy trying to seem fierce, especially compared to the opponents I faced back in my rebellious days.
Fine. I'll leave this house myself.
With those words, Ashley threw the towel she was holding and stormed out to the hallway. Soon after, the front door was slammed shut, as loudly as the rain. The living room returned to a state where only the sound of rain prevailed. Emerson, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Bro. Perhaps worried that her well-intentioned actions had inadvertently hurt her brother more than expected. Tentatively, she reached out to Connolly, who quietly stood up from the sofa. Sorry, Emerson, Mom. I'm going to my room. Connolly, looking utterly defeated, followed Ashley out to the hallway. His ascent to the second floor was visible through the open door, indicating he truly went back to his room. Mom, Emerson's previous bravado was nowhere to be seen. Uncharacteristically, Emerson looked as if she was on the verge of tears. I pulled her close and hugged her. You did nothing wrong. Sooner or later, that woman's true nature would have been revealed. Perhaps Connolly was turning a blind eye for Glenn's sake, letting things get worse. If you acted thinking of Connolly's best interest, stand tall. The rest is up to him to overcome. I stroked her back, as if comforting a small child. Then, perhaps reaching her limit, I could hear her sobbing over my shoulder. As the rain continued to mask our sorrows, regrets, and wounds, the night deepened, marking the collapse of a family. The day after those events, I found myself at a loss. How to explain Ashley's actions to Glenn was the question. While it was Connolly's place as the parent, given his state, it was uncertain if he could explain it well even after some time had passed. Yet, whether it was my place to intervene as just the grandmother was also unclear. Sadly, my concerns were unnecessary, as it seemed Glenn had overheard the heated argument involving Ashley the previous night. Mom left home, didn't she? I heard her angry voice yesterday. She's gone to someone unknown, hasn't she? Glenn mentioned this upon realizing his mom hadn't returned home that morning. While Emerson awkwardly tried to console him, Glenn, trying not to worry her, smiled bravely and said,
It's okay, Emerson. Mom looked really happy when she was talking on the phone with that unknown person. Happier than when she talks to Dad.
It seemed the child had his own thoughts about witnessing his mother's actions. Glenn had accepted reality more firmly than expected. As for Connolly, who seemed shockingly affected at that time, he also emerged from his room the next day, likely realizing he couldn't afford to dwell in sadness with his son still there. I was relieved, fearing he might shut himself away in shock. I hope this turns into a case of after rain comes fair weather. With that wish, I glanced outside the window to a refreshing blue sky, as if the previous day's rain had never happened. Time has passed since that day. Since then, Ashley and Connolly haven't met, but it seems they've officially divorced through mediation. Custody, of course, went to Connolly. There was one instance of contact from Ashley post-divorce. According to Connolly, the man Ashley had an affair with, whom she believed was single, turned out to be married with children and involved in legal troubles. Ashley, having been abandoned by him and unable to pay the compensation demanded in their divorce, pleaded with Connolly, her ex-husband. Of course, he rejected her plea. After the incident, Connolly resigned from his job and joined the company I run, despite it offering a significantly lower salary. He said he wanted to spend more time with Glenn. Though the reason involves my dear grandson, I have no intention of spoiling them. Our small company, now a trio, continues its modest operation, yet feels livelier than before.
Seeing what happened to Bro makes me think I'm better off working, Emerson remarked.
Don't say that. That was just a case of choosing the wrong partner. Marriage can be good, depending on the situation. Connolly responded without pausing his computer work.
That's because you're a man. For women, it's usually about when they'll do the housework, when they'll have kids, and all the nagging from everyone around them. Just let them say what they want. Hey, Emerson, you've stopped working.
Reminded, she resumed working with a childlike yes, and started moving her hands again. Then, the hurried footsteps of a child approached.
Grandma, I've finished folding the clothes.
Is that so? Thank you, Glenn. As I patted the head of my approaching grandson, he smiled back happily. Like Connolly and Emerson in their youth, Glenn helped with house chores when he had no plans with friends.
Well, Glenn has worked hard. Connolly, why don't you take a break with Glenn? That's unfair. I want a break too. You've been all talk since a while ago. Your break is still far off. How mean!
Emerson started to fake cry. Approaching Emerson, Glenn said,
Emerson, he who does not work, neither shall he eat, you know.
At Emerson's exaggerated reaction, clutching her chest, I couldn't help but burst into laughter.
Glenn, where did you learn such a phrase?
I forgot, he said with an angelic smile. Glenn managed to make not only me and Connolly but even Emerson laugh along. After the turmoil with Ashley, I wondered what would become of us, but here we are, the four of us, sharing laughs together. Our days are not without challenges, but they are filled with joy. Have we really reached after rain comes fair weather? I hope that this ground we've settled on remains solid, allowing our peaceful days to continue.
I'm sitting here in my living room, the soft hum of the old clock my late husband built marking time's passage. It's a small, cozy house, filled to the brim with memories, each corner telling a story of love, loss, and everything in between. My name's Margaret, but everyone close calls me Maggie. I'm 69 years young, a retired school teacher who's seen her fair share of life's ups and downs. My son, Jack, is a strapping lad of 42. Married for more than a decade, he's got a daughter, Lily, who's as bright and lively as a 10-year-old can be. Then there's Emily, my daughter-in-law. Our relationship's been, well, complicated, to put it mildly. Mom, you sure you don't need anything else done around here? Jack's voice pulls me from my thoughts as he stands in the doorway, concern etched on his face. I shake my head, offering him a smile. I'm all set, sweetheart. This old house is holding up just fine, thanks to your dad's handiwork. He nods, though I can tell he's not entirely convinced. All right, but if you need anything, you call me, okay? Don't bother with Emily, you know how she gets. I sigh. Jack, she's your wife. I don't want to cause any trouble between you two. He shrugs, a bit of frustration showing. Yeah, well, things have been tense. But we'll manage. We always do. The conversation shifts to lighter topics, Jack filling me in on Lily's latest school project and Emily's plans for the weekend. But there's an unspoken tension in the air, a distance that wasn't there before. As Jack leaves, promising to visit again soon, I can't help but feel a pang of loneliness. The house feels emptier without the laughter and chaos that used to accompany my son and his family's visits. The phone rings, shattering the silence. It's Emily, her voice icy as she speaks. Margaret, I need you to watch Lily tomorrow. Something's come up. I bristle at her tone, but my love for Lily wins out. Of course, I'll watch her. She's my granddaughter, after all. Emily's reply is curt, a simple thanks, before she hangs up. I stare at the phone, a mix of sadness and frustration churning within me. What happened to the days when Emily would chat with me about recipes and gift ideas for Jack? When did everything become so transactional? I spend the rest of the day tidying up the house, preparing for Lily's visit. It's in these quiet moments, surrounded by the love and care that went into building this home, that I find my strength. This house, built on memories, stands as a testament to the life my husband and I built together. And no amount of tension or harsh words can take that away from me. Back in the day, life was simpler, or so it seemed. I was still teaching, shaping young minds, while my son Jack was just starting to make his way in the world. Emily entered our lives like a whirlwind, full of ideas and ambition, which I admired, even if we didn't see eye to eye on everything. Mom, I want you to meet Emily, Jack had said, his eyes shining with that look of love I hadn't seen in a long while. I think she's the one. I remember meeting her for the first time. She was outspoken, a stark contrast to the quiet steadiness of my Jack. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Thompson, she'd said, offering me a firm handshake that somehow felt more like a challenge than a greeting. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. Call me Maggie, dear. Mrs. Thompson makes me feel like I'm still in the classroom. She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. All right, Maggie it is. Jack's told me so much about you. Those early days were a mix of getting to know Emily and adjusting to the new dynamics she brought into our family. Jack was smitten, and I, despite my reservations, hoped for the best. Emily would often come to me for advice, especially when it came to Jack. Maggie, what does Jack like to eat? I want to surprise him, Emily asked one afternoon, her tone softer, almost vulnerable. I found myself warming to her in those moments. He loves beef stew, the way his dad used to make it. I can show you if you like. And so, we cooked together, a tentative peace forming between us. But it wasn't always easy. Emily had strong opinions, especially about how Jack should be advancing his career, which often led to heated discussions. "Jack needs to be more ambitious, Maggie," Emily would say, her frustration evident. "He's too comfortable here, too stuck in his ways." I'd bristle at her words, defending my son. "Jack's doing just fine. He's building his life, his way. Not everyone needs to chase after money and status." She'd sigh, rolling her eyes. "You don't get it. We need more if we're going to make something of ourselves." Despite these clashes, I saw how she pushed Jack, how they grew together. When Jack landed a well-paying job and later started his own business, I couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for Emily's drive. Yet, as their fortunes changed, so did our relationship. The visits became less frequent, the conversations more strained. Emily's requests for my help or advice dwindled until they stopped altogether. I missed my granddaughter terribly in those days. Lily was a bright spark, always eager to learn, to explore. I cherished the moments she'd spend with me, her laughter filling the house with joy. "Why doesn't Grandma come over anymore?" I overheard Lily ask her parents one day, her voice tinged with confusion and sadness. Jack was quick to reassure her. "Grandma's always welcome, sweetheart. We've just been busy, that's all." But Emily's response was cooler, more distant. "Your grandma has her own life, Lily. We can't expect her to be around all the time." I bit my tongue, refusing to let the hurt show. Instead, I focused on the love I had for my family, holding on to the hope that things would improve. It was Lily's 10th birthday, a milestone I'd been looking forward to for months. I had a special gift picked out, a book of fairy tales I knew she'd love, each story carefully chosen to spark that bright imagination of hers. But then, the unexpected happened. I didn't get an invite to the party. Not a call, not a message, nothing. It was as if I'd suddenly become invisible to them. Puzzled and hurt, I picked up the phone and dialed Jack's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful yet harried. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Jack, I was just wondering about Lily's birthday. Is there a party planned?" I tried to keep my voice light, but a note of disappointment must have crept in. There was a pause, then, "What do you mean?" "Emily sent you an invite weeks ago. She said you told her you couldn't make it. Said you had other plans?" My heart sank. "No, Jack, that's not true. I didn't receive anything. I wouldn't miss Lily's birthday for the world." I could hear the confusion in his voice as he replied, "That's weird. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. I'll talk to Emily and get back to you." But he never did get back to me about it. The next day, through the grapevine of small-town gossip, I found out the party was happening at their house, not out of town as I'd been led to believe. Feeling a mix of anger and sadness, I decided not to confront them about it. Instead, I dropped off the gift at their doorstep early in the morning, hoping Lily would at least know I'd thought of her. A few days after the party, I bumped into Karen, a neighbor, at the grocery store. She was all too eager to spill the details of the party, not realizing I hadn't been there. "Oh, Maggie, it was such a lovely do." Emily outdid herself this time. "Shame you couldn't make it, though. Lily kept asking for you." Karen chattered on, unaware of the hurt her words inflicted. I forced a smile, thanking her for the update, and quickly made my excuses to leave. The walk home felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. The situation gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. So, I called Jack again, this time more determined. "Jack, we need to talk about Lily's birthday," I said, cutting straight to the chase. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "Mom, now's not a good time. We're swamped with orders at work, and Emily's not been feeling great." I persisted. "I understand, but I need to know why I was told the party was somewhere else when it wasn't." Why was I lied to, Jack? There was a long pause, then Jack's voice, weary and a bit defensive. Mom, it's just. Emily thought it would be easier this way. She felt the dynamics have been a bit off lately and didn't want any awkwardness at the party. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. So, you decided to exclude me? To lie to me? Is that how we're solving problems now? Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Emily, she's got a way of seeing things, and sometimes it's just easier to go along with it. He tried to explain, sounding exhausted. I was too hurt to argue further. I see. Well, I hope it was worth it. I hope lying to your mother and excluding her from her granddaughter's birthday felt easier for you. Mom, please. Jack's voice cracked a little. It's not like that. But I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I have to go, Jack. We'll talk some other time. Hanging up, I felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and resignation. It was clear that my relationship with Emily, and now perhaps even with Jack, was more fractured than I'd realized. After the birthday mess, things went quiet. Too quiet. My house, cozy as it is, started feeling too big, too empty. That's when I decided to get myself a little company. A small dog, a bundle of energy and love. Named him Buster. The moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was the one to fill the house with life again. I couldn't wait to tell Lily about Buster. She's always loved animals, and I thought this might just be the thing to get her to visit. Picking up the phone, I dialed their number, heart racing a bit as it rang. Grandma. Lily's voice, bright and cheerful, filled my ears the moment she picked up. How are you? Doing just fine, love. Guess what? I've got a surprise for you. A little dog named Buster, I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. Really? A dog? That's awesome. I want to see him. Can I come over? Her enthusiasm was music to my ears. Of course, sweetheart. Anytime you want, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long. That very afternoon, the doorbell rang. There stood Emily, looking as if she'd rather be anywhere else, and Lily, eyes sparkling with excitement. We can't stay long, Emily announced, barely crossing the threshold. Ignoring the tension, I ushered them into the kitchen, deciding to make the best of it. Let me get you some tea and cake. Make yourselves at home. As we settled, Emily's eyes roamed, landing on the new oven and the bits of new furniture around the house. These are new, she remarked, her tone sharp. Who bought them for you? My son did, for my birthday, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Her face turned a shade redder, anger flashing in her eyes. You shouldn't be demanding money from him like that, she snapped. Before I could even think of a response, Lily came running in, a scratch visible on her arm. Emily saw it and lost it. That dog of yours bit my daughter, she accused, voice rising. He didn't bite me, Mom. I scratched myself outside, Lily tried to explain, but Emily wasn't having any of it. We're leaving. And we won't be back, Emily declared, dragging Lily away before I could even get a word in. Once they'd left, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I needed some sense talked into me, so I called my sister, Carol. Carol, you won't believe what just happened, I started, recounting the whole ordeal. Carol, ever the voice of reason, listened quietly before speaking. Maggie, don't let it get to you. It's clear as day that dog didn't bite anyone. Emily's just looking for an excuse. But Jack won't even answer my calls now. And neither will they, I said, feeling defeated. Give it time, Maggie. They'll come around. And if they don't, well, you've got Buster and me. We're your family too, you know, Carol replied, her voice firm yet comforting. She was right, of course. Buster wagged his tail, looking up at me with those big, loving eyes. No words needed. He was here, and so was Carol. Maybe that was enough family for now. Thanks, Carol. I needed that, I said, feeling a bit better. Want to come over and meet Buster? I thought you'd never ask. I'll be right over, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Hanging up, I looked down at Buster, who seemed to sense my mood had lifted. Looks like it's just you and me, kid. And Carol, when she gets here. We're gonna be just fine. A year. A whole year without a word, without seeing their faces. The silence was deafening, the loneliness, a constant companion alongside Buster. Then, life threw another curveball, pneumonia. It hit me like a freight train, landing me in the hospital, before I even knew what was happening. Carol, bless her, was by my side every day, worry etched deep in her brows. Lying there, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, I felt the weight of the year's silence heavier than ever. Carol, can you call Jack for me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was a long shot, but I had to try. She hesitated, knowing all too well the silence that had filled the void between us. But she nodded, pulling out her phone and dialing Jack's number. I listened, holding my breath, as she spoke. Jack, it's Carol. Your mom's in the hospital. She's very sick. Yes, pneumonia. She's asking for you. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Then, I heard him, his voice distant but clear. I'll come now. True to his word, Jack arrived at the hospital, a storm of emotions playing across his face. He approached my bed, taking my hand in his, eyes brimming with unshed tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. He started, his voice breaking. I've been such a fool. I could barely speak, my illness and the emotion of the moment rendering me weak. Why, Jack? Why did you believe that, about Buster? He looked away, shame coloring his features. Emily told me, showed me a scratch on Lily's arm. Said Buster attacked her. I was angry, hurt. I thought I don't know. Listening to him, it was clear how deeply the lie had cut, driving a wedge between us. Jack, you know Buster. He wouldn't hurt a fly. I know now, Mom. I saw him, he's gentle. Emily, she lied to me. I'm so sorry. I should have known better. He admitted, his voice laced with regret. The admission, the apology, it was bittersweet. My heart ached for the lost time, for the pain we'd both endured because of a lie. Jack, it's okay. We're here now. That's what matters, I said, squeezing his hand, offering forgiveness, because holding on to anger would only prolong the pain. He nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm going to make this right, Mom. I promise. Hearing those words, feeling his hand in mine, I believed him. Maybe this was the start of mending what had been broken, of healing not just my body, but our family too. Things were just starting to look up when out of nowhere, trouble came knocking again. This time, it wore a suit and called itself a lawyer, claiming to represent Jack. The voice on the phone was all business, saying he needed me to sign some documents, because Jack was abroad and in a bind. Something about the whole thing smelled fishy to me. First thing I did was try calling Jack, but wouldn't you know it, his phone was as good as a brick. No answer. That's when I got that sinking feeling in my gut. I rang up Carol, told her to come over quick. Something's not right, I told her, pacing the floor until she showed up. When the lawyer showed up, all smiles and handshakes, I knew I had to play it smart. He pushed a stack of papers towards me, saying it was all just formalities, that Jack needed this done pronto. I'd like a minute to read these, if you don't mind, I said, trying to buy some time. Oh, there's no need to worry. It's all straightforward, he assured me, but I wasn't buying what he was selling. I needed Carol to get a look at these documents without him hovering, so I suggested a little stroll in the garden. Let's get some fresh air, then I'll sign, I proposed. To my surprise, he agreed. While we were outside, Carol was inside, snapping pictures of the documents with her phone. Turns out, those papers were nothing short of a nightmare. They were trying to get me to sell my house for peanuts and ship off to a nursing home, claiming I was too sick to take care of myself. Before I could process it all, Emily stormed in, red-faced and yelling like a banshee. "Just sign the damn papers, Margaret. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stood my ground, refusing to be bullied. "I'm not signing anything until I talk to Jack," I said firmly. That's when I called the police. Emily was livid, spewing lies about me having dementia, trying to paint me as some doddering old fool. The police showed up, and Emily switched gears, playing the concerned family member. But we had proof. I showed them the audio recording of the lawyer's spiel, and Carol showed them the photos she'd taken of the documents. Emily's tune changed real quick, then. The police took her in for questioning, and the whole house of cards she'd been building came tumbling down. After the fiasco with the lawyer and Emily's plot being foiled, things started moving quickly. The police had enough evidence to start unraveling the tangled web of lies that had been spun around me. But the real turning point came when Jack finally got back from his trip abroad. He was shocked to learn about the chaos that had unfolded in his absence. Jack came straight to my house, a mix of worry and anger clouding his face. "Mom, I just landed and heard about what happened. Can you fill me in on everything?" I sighed, looking at my son, seeing the confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Jack, it's been a mess. That lawyer, the one Emily hired, tried to trick me into signing away the house. And if it weren't for your Aunt Carol, I might have fallen for it." Jack's face turned red with anger. "That's unbelievable. Emily told me she was just taking care of some family business while I was gone. I had no idea she was plotting something like this." Carol, who had been a rock throughout this ordeal, chimed in. "We caught everything on tape, Jack. And I took pictures of the documents they tried to get Maggie to sign. It's clear as day what their intentions were." Jack shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe she'd go this far. To think, she used our daughter to further her lie. I'm going to confront Emily about this. She needs to explain herself." The confrontation between Jack and Emily was inevitable. He left our house, determined to get to the bottom of things. When he returned, he was alone, his expression somber. "Mom, Emily," she admitted to everything. "Said she felt cornered, that she didn't know what else to do. I told her it's over. We're getting a divorce. I can't be with someone who'd put my own mother through something like this." Hearing Jack's words, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was finally out, but sorrow for the pain my son was going through. "Jack, I'm so sorry it's come to this. But I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right." Jack nodded, pulling me into a hug. "I should have listened to you sooner, Mom. I'm just glad you're okay." In the days that followed, we worked on healing the rifts that had formed. Jack was a frequent visitor, often bringing Lily along, who was overjoyed to spend time with Buster and me. The ordeal had brought us closer, reminding us of the importance of family and truth. After the storm comes the calm. That's how it felt once everything with Emily was settled. Jack got the divorce finalized, and though it was a tough period for him and Lily, they started to find their rhythm again. Life at the house felt fuller, happier with their frequent visits. It was like we were all breathing a bit easier, ready to welcome whatever came next with open arms. One sunny afternoon, as I watched Jack and Lily playing with Buster in the garden, I realized how much things had changed. Jack walked over, settling down beside me with a sigh. "Mom, I've been thinking," he started, watching Lily throw a ball for Buster. "I want to start fresh, maybe even move closer to you. What do you think?" I smiled, the idea warming my heart. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Having you and Lily nearby would be a dream come true." Lily ran over, breathless and laughing. "Grandma, did you see how fast Buster is?" Her eyes sparkled with joy, so much like her father's. "I sure did, sweetheart. He's got quite the sprint on him," I replied, hugging her close. As we sat there, chatting about school, friends, and all the little things in between, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. The ordeal we'd gone through had somehow brought us closer, strengthening the bond between us. Later that week, Carol dropped by for her usual visit. Over cups of tea, we reflected on the past few months. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, our lives found a new normal. Jack and Lily did move closer, just a few streets away, making spontaneous visits a regular occurrence. The laughter and love that filled my home were a balm to my soul, healing old wounds and bridging any gaps that had formed. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, Jack raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, to family, and to a future filled with love and laughter. We've come through the storm, and now it's time to enjoy the sunshine. We all echoed his sentiment, clinking glasses and sharing smiles. It was a simple moment, but it held the weight of everything we'd endured and overcome together. My name's Monica, and I don't remember a time when my parents weren't fighting. Their screaming matches are some of my earliest memories, filling our house with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was just a kid, but even then, I knew something was seriously wrong. I was 4 when everything came to a head. Mom and Dad's arguments had gotten worse, if that was even possible. One night, I woke up to the sound of shattering glass and my mom yelling, "That's it, Mark, I've had enough." The next morning, Dad was gone. Just like that, my family was torn in two. It didn't take long for Dad to move on. Within months, he'd remarried some woman named Caroline and moved across town. From then on, our relationship became a joke. He'd call on holidays, his voice distant and awkward like he was talking to a stranger, not his own kid. The rest of the year, the only sign I had of father was the monthly alimony check he sent to Mom. Mom, for her part, was a mess. Linda Thompson, once the picture of a happy housewife, now a single mother, struggling to keep it together. She threw herself into her work as a real estate agent, but it was obvious she was floundering. I was 7 when Mom started getting weird. She'd always been a bit impulsive, but this was different. One day, she came home with a bunch of books and DVDs about day trading. "This is it, Monica," she said, her eyes shining with a manic gleam that scared me a little. "We're going to be rich." For weeks, she was glued to her computer, muttering about stocks and trades. She'd forget to pick me up from school, or to make dinner. When I'd ask her to play with me, she'd wave me off. "Not now, sweetie. Mommy's working on our future." But our future wasn't looking too bright. I learned to fend for myself pretty quick. By 8, I could make my own meals, even if it was just a peanut butter sandwich, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school. Mom was too caught up in her get-rich-quick schemes to notice. Things came to a head when I was 9. Mom burst into my room one day, her eyes wild with excitement. "I'm going on a trip to Bali. I've found someone who can help us, sweetie. He's going to show me how to unlock my luck chakra. This is going to change everything." I didn't know what a luck chakra was, but I knew it sounded like trouble. And just like that, I was shipped off to Aunt Rachel's, my mom's friend, while Mom chased her latest crazy scheme halfway across the world. For 6 long weeks, I lived with Aunt Rachel while Mom was off on her spiritual journey in Bali. Don't get me wrong, Rachel was great. She really tried to make things normal for me. "Come on, Monica," she'd say with forced cheerfulness every morning. "Time for summer camp." I'd drag myself out of bed, pretending to be excited about another day of crafts and organized fun while my mind was miles away, wondering what the hell Mom was doing on the other side of the world. Weekends with Rachel were better. We'd go to the zoo or the beach, and for a few hours, I could almost forget the mess my life had become. But then I'd catch her looking at me with pity in her eyes, and reality would come crashing back. When Mom finally came back, it was like she was a whole new person. Her eyes were bright, her smile wide, and she couldn't stop talking about positive thinking and manifesting wealth. "Monica, sweetie, our lives are about to change," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of incense and something else I couldn't quite place. I've unlocked my true potential. You'll see. It started small. A lottery ticket here, a scratch card there. Mom would come home giddy with excitement over a $20 win, treating me to pizza and new clothes like we were millionaires. "See, Monica? The universe is rewarding us," she'd say, waving the ticket in the air like it was made of gold. I should have known it was too good to be true. Soon, the small bets weren't enough. That's when the casino trip started. The first time she went, she came home at dawn, reeking of cigarettes and cheap perfume, but grinning from ear to ear. "I won $500, she exclaimed, throwing a wad of cash on the kitchen table. "This is just the beginning, honey. Soon, we'll be living in a mansion." I forced a smile, but my stomach was in knots. Something told me this wasn't going to end well. As the weeks went by, Mom's trips to the casino became more frequent. Sometimes she'd win, coming home in a whirlwind of manic energy, talking a mile a minute about her system and how she'd cracked the code. But more often, she'd slink in quietly, her eyes red and puffy, smelling of booze and defeat. The good days were getting rarer, and the bad days, well, they were getting a lot worse. One weekend, Mom disappeared for 2 whole days. She left me with a stack of frozen dinners and a stern warning. "Remember, Monica, this is our little secret," she said, her eyes hard. "If anyone asks, I'm not feeling well and I'm resting in my room. Got it?" When she finally came home Sunday night, she looked like hell. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair a mess, and she couldn't even look me in the eye. "Mommy just had a bit of bad luck. But don't worry, it'll turn around soon. I can feel it." But it didn't turn around. The trips got longer, the losses bigger. I started dreading the sound of her key in the lock in the early hours of the morning. A quiet entry meant a good night at the tables. A slam meant losses, and those were happening more and more often. Grandma Elizabeth was like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating mess my life had become. She lived in the next state over, but she made a point of visiting every few months. Those visits became my lifeline, a glimpse of normalcy in the chaos. But they were also incredibly stressful. The minute we got word that Grandma was coming, Mom would go into full-on panic mode. "Monica," she'd yell, already pulling out cleaning supplies. "We need to get this place in shape. Your grandmother can't see it like this." And so began the frenzied cleaning sprees. We'd spend days scrubbing, dusting, and hiding evidence of Mom's hobby. Dirty dishes that had been piling up for weeks suddenly vanished. The overflowing ashtrays were emptied, and the lingering smell of stale smoke was masked with air freshener. But the worst part wasn't the cleaning, but the lying. "Now remember," Mom would coach me, her eyes hard and serious, "everything's great. I'm doing well at work, and we're very happy. Got it?" When Grandma Elizabeth would finally arrive, I'd plaster on a fake smile and pretend everything was just peachy. But inside, I was screaming. I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to beg her to take me away from all this. But I couldn't. I couldn't betray Mom like that. Grandma Elizabeth didn't know that the money she kept sending us, money meant for my care and education, was going straight into the casinos. Mom would cash the checks and be out the door before the ink was dry, chasing that elusive big win that would solve all our problems. As I got older, it became harder to ignore the reality of our situation. There were days when the fridge stood empty, and I'd have to ration my school lunches to make them last through dinner. On my 12th birthday, Grandma Elizabeth made a gesture that would change everything. She came to visit, bringing with her a shiny new smartphone, the kind all the cool kids at school had. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, handing me the gift-wrapped box. "Linda, I've got something for you too. I've opened a college fund for Monica. It's in your name since she's still a minor, but it's for her future. Just promise me you'll use it wisely." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "I swear, Elizabeth. I'll never touch that money for anything else. Monica's future means everything to me." As I hugged my grandmother goodbye later that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe now, with my future secure, Mom would finally get the help she needed. At first, everything was fine. Mom started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, picked up some real estate clients again. I threw myself into my studies, daring to dream about college and a future free from the chaos of the past few years. But like all the times before, Mom's resolve didn't last. Within months, she was back to her old habits. The excuses started small. "I'm just too tired for the meeting tonight, honey. I'll go next week." But next week never came. Soon, she was disappearing for days at a time again, leaving me to fend for myself. I was 13 now, and I'd become scarily good at being the adult in our household. I could forge Mom's signature perfectly on school documents, a skill born from necessity rather than rebellion. I even taught myself to cook, whipping up simple meals from whatever I could scrounge up in our perpetually bare pantry. Anything to keep my stomach from growling during class. As I entered high school, I withdrew more and more. Making friends felt impossible. How could I invite anyone over when I never knew what state the house, or Mom, would be in? The few times I tried to open up, I was met with blank stares or awkward silence. No one could understand what my life was really like. By 16, I was desperate for some control over my life. That's when I decided to get a job. The local coffee shop was hiring, and to my surprise, the manager hired me on the spot. That coffee shop became my sanctuary. For a few hours each day, I could pretend to be normal. Just another teen working her first job, not the daughter of a gambling addict, barely keeping her head above water. And the money, well, it wasn't much, but it was mine. But reality has a way of shattering even the most carefully constructed illusions. One night, after a late shift at the coffee shop, I came home to find the front door unlocked. Alarm bells went off in my head immediately. Mom might be irresponsible, but she always locked the door. The house was a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, and a smell I couldn't quite place hanging in the air. Then I heard it, muffled sobs coming from the living room. I found Mom sprawled on the floor, an empty wine bottle clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She was on the phone, her words slurred and barely coherent. "I've lost everything," she was saying, her voice breaking. "Just one more chance. I know I can turn it around with one big win." My blood ran cold. I knew, with a certainty that made me sick to my stomach, what she was talking about. I waited until Mom passed out, snoring on the living room floor, before I made my move. With shaking hands, I opened her laptop. It took me a few tries to find the right banking app and guess the password. But when I did, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The account was empty. Completely drained. Years of saving, Grandma's generous gift, my entire future, gone. I stormed into the living room where Mom was still passed out. I shook her awake, my hands trembling with rage. "Mom, wake up. We need to talk about the money." She blinked at me, confusion and pain etched across her face. "What? Monica, what are you talking about?" "The college fund, Mom. The one Grandma set up for me. The one you swore you'd never touch. It's gone." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she tried to deny it, her voice weak and unconvincing. No, you must be mistaken. I would never." But as I laid out the evidence, the empty account, the late-night phone call I'd overheard, her denials crumbled. In their place came the accusations. "You ungrateful brat," she screamed, her face contorted with rage and shame. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Snooping through my private information?" It was like a dam had burst. Years of resentment, fear, and disappointment came pouring out of both of us. We screamed and cried, hurling bitter words at each other like weapons. And then it happened. In a moment of blind fury, Mom's hand lashed out, catching me across the face. The force of the blow knocked me back, and I felt a sharp sting where her ring had cut my cheek. I raised a hand to my throbbing cheek, feeling the warm trickle of blood. Without a word, I turned and fled to my room, locking the door behind me. I slid down to the floor, my back against the door, and finally let the tears come. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't stay here anymore. I packed a backpack with some clothes and the little money I'd saved from my coffee shop job. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I slipped out of the house without a backwards glance. When I showed up on Dad's doorstep, his reaction was lukewarm at best. He invited me in awkwardly, shooting apologetic glances at Caroline, his wife, who didn't even try to hide her annoyance at my presence. I poured out the whole story: Mom's gambling, the empty college fund, the fight. I watched Dad's face change from shock to anger and finally to a resigned weariness that made my heart sink. I spent that night in their guest room, feeling like an intruder in what should have been my second home. As I lay there, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized I'd been foolish to hope for rescue. My suspicions were confirmed the next evening when I overheard Dad on the phone with Mom. "You need to come get her, Linda," he hissed, his voice low but clear through the thin walls. "This isn't my problem. I've been paying child support for years. That should have been more than enough to cover her education." I crept back to the guest room, my heart heavy with the final death of a hope I hadn't even realized I'd been clinging to. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't stay here. The next morning, I sat on the bus, my backpack clutched to my chest, watching the miles tick by. I was headed to Grandma Elizabeth's house in the next state over. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had left. My stomach churned with anxiety. What if Grandma turned me away too? What if Mom had already gotten to her with lies and excuses? I'd been let down so many times before, I wasn't sure I could handle another rejection. When I finally arrived at Grandma Elizabeth's house, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I stood on her porch for what felt like hours, trying to work up the courage to knock. But I needn't have worried. The moment Grandma opened the door and saw me standing there, her face went from shocked to concerned to fiercely protective in the span of seconds. "Monica, sweetheart, what are you doing here? Are you all right?" Before I knew it, I was wrapped in her arms, sobbing out the whole miserable story. The gambling, the lies, the empty college fund, the fight with Mom, Dad's rejection, all of it came pouring out in a flood of tears and broken words. Grandma listened to it all, her face growing stormier with each revelation. When I finally finished, she cupped my face in her hands, her eyes blazing with determination. "You're safe now, honey," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "We're going to fix this. Together." Grandma Elizabeth wasted no time. She called her friend who was a lawyer, discussing terms like paternal rights and gambling that made my head spin. But mostly, she was preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. When Mom finally arrived, summoned by Grandma's demands, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the towering figure of my childhood. But the moment she opened her mouth, I realized some things hadn't changed at all. "Elizabeth, thank goodness you called," Mom said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I've been so worried about Monica. She's been acting out, telling wild stories. I just don't know what to do with her anymore. I've tried my best, but she's been so difficult, so ungrateful." But Grandma Elizabeth wasn't buying it. Without a word, she opened her laptop and pulled up the bank statements showing the now empty college fund. "Would you care to explain this, Linda?" Grandma asked, her voice ice cold. The color drained from Mom's face as she stared at the screen. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. It was like watching a balloon deflate. "I can explain," she finally stammered. "Things have been tough, and I just needed to borrow a little. I was going to pay it back." But her excuses were weak, and she knew it. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized she wasn't going to be able to lie her way out of this one. And then, in a last desperate attempt to regain control, Mom's face hardened. "You know what? I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm Monica's mother. That money was in my name. I had every right to spend it how I saw fit." Grandma Elizabeth's eyes flashed with a fierce determination I'd never seen before. She leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. You're right about one thing, Linda. There's no legal document stating that money was exclusively for Monica's education. It was a trust placed in you, which you betrayed. But let me be clear about what I can do. Mom's smug expression faltered as Grandma continued. That house you've been living in? The one you've neglected for years? I bought that as an investment property. And I'm selling it. Immediately. Mom's face went pale. You can't do that. Where will we live? We? Grandma raised an eyebrow. There is no we, Linda. The proceeds from the sale will go towards Monica's education and setting her up with a small apartment near her chosen college. I felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by fear as I saw Mom's face contort with rage. But Grandma wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm suing for custody of Monica. Your gambling addiction, financial abuse, and that little physical altercation you had? All grounds for termination of parental rights. The room fell silent. I held my breath, watching Mom's face as the reality of her situation sank in. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. What followed was a whirlwind of legal activity. Mom, faced with losing everything, fought back hard at first. She hired this slick lawyer who tried to paint me as some troubled teen and Grandma as a meddling old woman. But the evidence against Mom was overwhelming. My teachers came forward, talking about how my grades had slipped, how I'd sometimes come to school looking exhausted or hungry. My manager from the coffee shop testified about my work ethic, how I'd sometimes beg for extra shifts even when I was dead on my feet. With each testimony, I watched Mom shrink a little more in her seat. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Mom's sponsor from Gamblers Anonymous broke the code of anonymity to testify. She stood up in court and laid it all out: Mom's severe addiction, her repeated relapses, her refusal to truly engage with the program. That was the moment Mom finally broke. As the sponsor spoke, I saw something crumble in Mom's eyes. When she took the stand, gone was the defiant, lying woman I'd known for years. In her place was someone small, broken, and finally, honest. I have a problem, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've hurt my daughter. I've betrayed her trust. I've ruined everything. As I watched my mother break down on the stand, confessing to years of addiction and neglect, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to finally hear her admit the truth. Part of me was angry that it had taken this long, that it had to come to this. And part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, felt a grim satisfaction seeing her finally face the consequences of her actions. But mostly, I felt tired. So incredibly, bone-deep tired. As Mom's sobs echoed through the courtroom, I closed my eyes, hoping that somehow, some way, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. In the matter of custody for Monica Thompson, the court rules in favor of Elizabeth Thompson. Linda Thompson's parental rights are hereby terminated. Dad was given a chance to step up, to fight for custody, but he didn't even show up to the hearing. His lawyer simply stated that Mark Thompson would not be contesting Elizabeth's guardianship. Just like that, both my parents had washed their hands of me. True to her word, Grandma Elizabeth sold Mom's house. She combined the proceeds with her own savings to set up a new trust fund for my education. This time it was ironclad: the money could only be used for tuition, books, and other school-related expenses. No one, not even Elizabeth herself, could touch it for anything else. As my high school graduation approached, Grandma and I spent our weekends getting ready for my next big step. She'd bought me a small apartment near the college I'd chosen, and we had fun picking out furniture and decorating it. As we worked, we talked about my plans for the future. I'd decided to major in social work, with a minor in psychology. After everything I'd been through, I wanted to help other kids who were struggling. But even as I settled into my new life, I couldn't shake the conflicting emotions that churned inside me. I was relieved to finally have stability, to know where my next meal was coming from and not have to worry about keeping the lights on. But I also felt guilty. What would happen to Mom now? And as much as I tried to push it down, I was angry. Angry at Mom for her addiction, at Dad for his indifference, at both of them for failing me so completely. Grandma, perceptive as always, noticed my struggle. "Honey," she said gently one day, "I think it might be good for you to talk to someone. A professional, I mean. Someone who can help you process everything that's happened." It wasn't easy. Dredging up old memories, confronting feelings I'd tried so hard to bury, some days I left my sessions feeling wrung out and raw. But slowly, I started to heal. I learned that it was okay to be angry, to be sad, to grieve for the childhood I never had. I learned that my parents' failures weren't my fault, and that I didn't owe them my forgiveness until I was ready to give it, if ever. As I packed up my things, ready to move into my new apartment and start my college journey, I made a difficult decision. I wasn't going to reach out to Mom or Dad. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. I needed to focus on myself, on building the life I wanted, free from their chaos and disappointment. As we drove towards my new apartment, towards my new life, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. There would be tough days, days when the old pain and anger would resurface. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope for my future. I was Monica Thompson. I was a survivor. And now, finally, I had the chance to become so much more. My life's kinda been like a whirlwind tour of the world's kitchen, only with more passport stamps and less sanity. Name's Kira, fresh into the third decade of my ride on this rock, and I've made a living out of breathing in the spices and dishing out the experience through my vlog. So it was just another steamy day in Thailand, with me elbow deep in noodles and peanuts, learning the ropes of an insane pad thai from this little old dude who could have been Yoda's culinary cousin. That's when this tall drink of water, Mark, stumbled into my life, literally. He tripped over a foldable chair trying to get a better look at the pan and nearly ended our romance before it started by nearly sending me headfirst into my own sizzle. "Whoa, sorry about that," he chuckled, hauling the chair out of the disaster zone. "Just trying to see how the magic happens." "You could say it's all in the wrist action," I said, giving the noodles a flamboyant toss. "Careful there, wouldn't want to add roadkill tourist to today's menu." Mark laughed, all easy charm and crinkly-eyed smiles. "Mark," he said, extending a hand once he was sure it was safe. "Kira, the noodle whisperer," I replied, giving his hand a quick shake before diving back into my culinary ballet. And there it was. We clicked quicker than a camera shutter. He was from the States, here to escape the office walls and spreadsheets, which, to me, sounded like a jailbreak from Adulting 101. We spent the week flitting between street food stalls and ancient temples, with him filming the chaos and me explaining the dance between tangy, sweet, spicy, and umami. When the week ended, we swapped digits. Said our "see you laters" 'cause goodbyes were for people who had less faith in cheap international texting plans. Months sped past like high-speed train rides, nights spent spilling our thoughts via texts that turned into calls that turned into video chats. Then one day, he just showed up at my doorstep with a ring and a question. We tied the knot 6 months later. Yeah, just like that. Bam. Married. Things took a nosedive after a while. Forget the lovey-dovey honeymoon phase, it was like we'd skipped straight to bickering old couple mode. I'd be coming home from some corner of the world, my brain still buzzing with the new flavors and faces I'd met, and all Mark could do was hassle me about not being normal. "You know what a normal wife does, Kira?" That's how he'd start, every single time. "She cooks, she cleans, she doesn't jet off every other week." Sitting there at the kitchen table, I'd toss my stuff down and give him a look. "Seriously, Mark? You think I just flit around for kicks? This is work. My work." To him, it was like my job was make-believe. "Work? You think filming some street food and yapping about it online is work? Get real. Get a proper job." Each word stung. "It pays, doesn't it?" I'd shoot back. but that was never enough. Once, I was up against a deadline, videos needed cutting, articles needed writing, and guess what? Mark barged into the office and dropped a bomb. "The house is a mess, Kira. When you gonna clean up?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You've got hands, Mark. Use 'em." Defying him only cranked his gears worse. "What, and let you loaf around editing videos all day? Is that what you call pulling your weight?" Freeloader. That's what he called me. In our own home. "I'm out there busting my tail to bring home the bacon," I told him, standing my ground. "And this freeloader you're talking to just paid off the last of your student loans with her hobby." But it was like talking to a brick wall. All he saw was a wife who wasn't fitting his mold, who wasn't, I don't know, June Cleaver or somebody. And the worst part? Instead of getting it through his thick skull that we were partners in this, he doubled down. "Why don't you make something of yourself, huh?" He'd sneer. "Get a job with a desk, something steady." "I am making something of myself," I shouted, slammed my laptop shut so hard I'm surprised it didn't break. "You think it's not a real job because I'm not miserable like you?" Normal was his favorite word. Bite to eat, 9 to 5, white picket fence, the whole boring shebang. Drove me nuts. But as for me, I wasn't about to let go of my passport or my dreams, no matter what he thought a wife should be. Beatrice, Mark's mom and my mother-in-law, was the kind of person whose idea of a surprise visit was her showing up in your living room ranting about something you did or didn't do. Living just a couple of streets away, she considered our house part of her daily walking route, which basically meant she'd drop by whenever she felt like it. So there I was one Tuesday, laptop open, trying to get some work done on my latest travel vlog. You could almost set your watch by Beatrice. Sure enough, like clockwork, the front door swings open, it's never locked for Beatrice, and there she was. "Working on your little videos again, huh?" Her voice dripped with disdain. She didn't even say hello. I sighed, trying not to look as interrupted as I felt. "Hey, Beatrice. Yeah, gotta keep on top of it." She tossed her oversized purse onto the couch and made herself comfortable. "You know, when I was your age, I was raising kids, keeping a spick-and-span house. Didn't have time for hobbies." Her words plucked at my already frayed nerves. "It's not a hobby, Beatrice. This is my job." Beatrice snorted as she peered over her glasses, which she only wore to make a point. "Call it what you want. When's the last time you cooked your husband a proper dinner? Or are you too busy working on these little trip films?" I bristled. She knew how to hit where it hurt. "Mark eats just fine. I don't hear him complaining." "Oh, he complains, all right. Just not to you." She smirked and picked at a non-existent speck of dust on her trousers. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shut my laptop, a little too hard, and stood up. "I'm right here, Beatrice. And I'm working. Bringing in money. Isn't that important too?" She huffed, getting up. "Well, if you won't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to the pastor. We're having dinner tonight, and he'll set you straight." I was dumbfounded. "Dinner? Tonight? Beatrice, I have deadlines." "Not anymore. You can put off your deadlines to save your marriage. I've seen the signs, Kira. It's now or never." Fuming, I barely managed to keep a civil tone. "Fine. But this is our life, not just mine or Mark's. Don't you forget that." Beatrice smirked, triumphant. "We'll see," she said, and plucked her purse up again. 6 o'clock. And wear something nice for a change. After the door clicked shut, the silence thudded in my ears like the after-ringing of a bell. So much for a quiet workday at home. Now I had to deal with a dinner ambush and a pastor mediating my marriage? Great, just great. Cooking had always been my kind of therapy, mixing flavors like I mixed colors on a canvas. But here came Beatrice, marching into my sanctuary like she owned the place, ready to burn it down with a single glance. That Thursday, I was in the zone, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, another recipe I'd picked up from my travels. The door flew open and Beatrice waltzed in, all frowns and scowls. "What's that smell?" was the greeting I got. No hello, as usual. I kept the irritation out of my voice, doing my best to stay polite. "Stir-fry. It's a recipe from Thailand," I replied, hoping she'd just sit down and maybe, just maybe, keep her opinions to herself for once. But no dice. "Can't you make anything normal? Real food?" Beatrice scoffed, planting her hands on her hips. I could feel the anger bunched up at the base of my throat, but I swallowed it down, trying to preserve some peace. "I just thought we'd try something new," I said. Mark poked at the food with a fork like he was testing if a piece of roadkill was ready to be scraped off the pavement. "New? I've seen better-looking garbage." "You tell her, Mark," Beatrice egged him on, her arms crossed over her chest. "Yeah, Kira, stick to what you know, which isn't much," he chuckled. His mom laughed along, slapping him playfully on the arm. I felt my cheeks burning up. This was too much, even for me. But before I could come up with anything to say, Beatrice grabbed the skillet from the stove. "Don't waste our time with this garbage," she hurled the contents of the skillet into the trash can. The room fell silent except for the hiss of leftover heat on the empty pan. I stood there, frozen, trying to wrap my head around the fact that the meal I had spent the last hour preparing was now mixed in with coffee grounds and eggshells. My effort to please, to do something different, felt foolish now. I looked at the trash, and I could feel every cruel word and snide remark they ever threw at me sticking to my skin. I couldn't even be mad anymore, it felt pointless. I started to clean up, my movements automatic. The kitchen felt colder now. I knew I should be angry, I should scream or cry or something to show them this wasn't okay. But instead, I just moved quietly, picking up the pieces of my failed attempt at dinner, at trying something, anything, to make this life I was living feel like it had a bit of me in it. The day had heated up more than the forecast said. It was Beatrice's birthday, and against my better judgment, I had gone and got her something special. Wrapped the gift myself, this mirror from Morocco, all hand-painted tiles and real craftsmanship. I thought she might appreciate something unique, something not from the department store clearance shelf. "So what did you get her?" Mark eyed me as he sprawled over the couch like some lazy cat. "Something nice?" I said, my hands tweaking the bow on the package, trying to smooth down my rising nerves. He chuckled. "You're nice, and her nice ain't the same, Kira." We were in the dining room, this shrine to dark wood and silence, waiting for the queen herself to show up. I heard her before I saw her, that voice curdling the air. "Mark, what's the hold-up? There's cake waiting." She swept in, her gaze fell on the gift, and she frowned. "What's that?" I handed over the package with a hopeful smile. "Happy birthday, Beatrice." She looked at me like I was offering a dead rat. But she took it, shredded the paper, and held up the mirror. "What in the world is this?" I felt Mark's stare burning into my scalp. "It's a mirror, handmade from Morocco." I thought it was beautiful, unique. "Unique?" she squawked, her face scrunching up. "It's hideous." And before I could even blink, she slammed the thing onto the floor. Shattered glass skittered across the tiles like wicked ice. Mark didn't even flinch. "Kira, what were you thinking?" His voice was sharp enough to cut. I stared at the broken mirror, feeling something inside me splinter along with it. I'm sorry, I thought. She cut me off with a wave of her hand, turned to Mark. "Tell your wife to stick to cash. Can't go wrong with money." I felt the shards of my patience giving away under my feet. I went to my purse, pulled out an envelope, last-minute insurance I knew I might need, and handed her 5 crisp $100 bills. "Here," I said, trying to hide the trembling in my words. She snatched the cash hungrily. Well, that's more like it. Mark walked over, swept a piece of broken mirror with his shoe, looking at me like I was the mess he had to clean up. Next time, just ask me what to get her, he snapped. I dumped the shards into the bin, listening to them tinkle like a chandelier in a quake. A quieter, angrier part of me wished I could tell her exactly where she could stick her money, but instead, I quietly wrapped her cake slices, got through the day without another word. As the hours lurched by, the house filled with the laughter and chitter of guests, all of them ignoring the tense undercurrent that was me and them. I handed out drinks, laughed when expected, and played the part of the devoted wife and daughter-in-law. That evening I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at my reflection in the smaller, unbroken mirror there. If only I could buy something to fix what was broken inside, I thought. The silent room seemed to agree, and for a long time, it was the most understanding company I had. The wheels of my suitcase dragged a rhythmic clunking over the joints in the sidewalk as I walked up to my front door. I'd just gotten back from Greece. I was there for a shoot, for weeks of filming and a slice of freedom that I didn't know I was starving for until I tasted it. My keys seemed to jangle extra loud as I fitted them into the lock and swung the door open. What hit me wasn't the smell of the house or the stack of unopened mail. It was Beatrice, planted in the middle of the living room, bags piled at her feet like she'd just claimed a spot on the subway. "I'm moving in," she declared, her voice brooking no argument. I felt my exhaustion evaporate into a tight ball of anxiety in my chest. "What? Why?" She eyed me like I was being thick on purpose. "Rent's killing me, and since you're never around, it makes sense. I'll take the guest room." This was the worst kind of surprise, the kind that didn't bring any joy, just a heavy weight. I looked to Mark, seeking an ally, but his face was set in stone. "Yeah, Kira, why the hell not? Makes sense to me," Mark said. I heard in his voice the finality of a door slamming shut. "But, Mark, He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Don't start. You've been freeloading off my space for years." The word stung, like rubbing alcohol on a fresh cut. That's when my hand dove into my bag, rummaging past the trinkets and memories of Greece until my fingers wrapped around the envelope, the one I kept tucked away for moments impossible to predict. I slapped the divorce papers on the coffee table between us. They seemed to hover for a second before landing, a soft sweep in the tense air. "I want a divorce." For a moment, Mark just stared, and the only sound was Beatrice's slow inhale as if she was about to dive underwater. He picked up the papers, and I braced myself for yelling, for pleading, anything. But without saying a word, he scrawled his name across the bottom and tossed them back at me like they were a takeout menu he didn't want. Beatrice, her eyes gleaming like when she found $50 in a coat pocket, actually clapped. "It's about time." I looked between the two of them, this pair that was supposed to be my family, and I felt nothing but the need to fill up my lungs. I didn't belong here, maybe I never did. With one last look at the shell of what used to be my life, I grabbed my suitcase. "Where you going, Kira?" Mark's voice was a dull blade, not cutting enough to hurt anymore. "Anywhere but here." My voice came out steadier than I felt. There were no goodbyes, just the click of the door behind me, a soft punctuation mark on the end of a very long, very tiring sentence. It's strange how life can do a 180 when you're least expecting it. A few months since the divorce and life settled into a new kind of normal. My apartment might have been smaller than the house, but it was mine. I was in the middle of a tea brewing ritual that had become my new little evening piece when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door, and there they were, Mark and Beatrice. Like they'd just been out for a walk and decided to stop by. "We saw your TV show," Mark said, shoving his hands into his pockets, a sheepish grin smeared across his face like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Beatrice just stood there, a forced smile stretching her lips tight. "Yeah?" I said, nursing my mug, not stepping aside to let them in. "You watching TV together now?" You're doing well, huh? Beatrice chimed in, peering over Mark's shoulder to get a look inside the apartment. I leaned against the door frame, taking a slow sip, feeling the heat of the tea and the situation. I suppose, I replied, the edge of a laugh bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't just small talk they were after, I could smell it. These two never came without an agenda. Beatrice looked desperate, fidgeting with her purse strap, and Mark looked like he was about to try selling me a used car that was 2 steps away from the junkyard. They tried to butter me up with compliments, nodding at my tiny living room as if it was a palace, but I wasn't biting. Their tune changed rapidly when the buttering didn't work. Look, Kira. Mark's gaze darted around, avoiding mine. Things ain't been so great since you left. Financially, I mean. I raised an eyebrow. Is that right? And it's not just about money, Beatrice piped up. It's lonely. We miss you. I couldn't help it then, I laughed. It was dry and had the edge of years of bottled-up frustrations behind it. You miss me? Well, that's a neat trick. Mark's face flushed a shade of guilt so vivid I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We just thought, maybe we could start over. I leaned closer, making sure they could see the lack of sympathy in my eyes. You thought wrong. I've moved on, and this? I paused, gesturing to the space between us with my mug. This is me being happy. Without the drama, without the mess. You two were the best bad decision I ever walked away from. Beatrice's mouth snapped shut, her face folding into a scowl. Mark just stood there like I'd slapped him across the face. They didn't say anything more, they didn't have to. As they turned away, their shoulders slumped, the door closed with a soft click and I was alone again, my heart pounding a victory march. I turned, pressing my back against the door, sliding down till I was sitting with the mug held loosely in my grip, my laughter ringing out, clear and loud in the empty apartment. Turning the tables never felt so good. My life's totally flipped since the show took off. People can't seem to get enough of me eating my way through the most out-of-way places and bringing back killer recipes. I guess it's true what they say, everyone loves a good comeback story, and mine's being served up nice and spicy. As I sat scrolling through my socials, watching the follower count tick up like it's got somewhere to be, my doorbell rings. Who could that be? I haven't ordered takeout. Lo and behold, there they were again, Mark dragging his feet and Beatrice trying to straighten out her scowl like she's walking into church. Kira, you gotta listen. Mark gets down on his knees right in my hallway like he's about to propose again, which is funny in a sad sort of way. I'll do anything. I'll even clean the house. Cook your meals. I crossed my arms, trying not to let my smirk show. Really? You cooking? That'd be the day. And Beatrice, oh, she's got this look like she just ate something sour. Kira, the show's great and all, but family's family. I let out a little chuckle. Oh, I know about family all right. And mine just got a whole lot bigger, a couple million online. They blinked at me, not quite getting it, so I spelled it out. My followers, Mark. They're my family now. And they seem to appreciate me a whole lot more. Beatrice piped up again, with her hands fidgeting like she's trying to pull words out of the air. Kira, we just didn't realize. I cut her off with a little wave of my hand. Save it. I've heard enough. Did I ever tell you about that mirror from Morocco, Beatrice? The one I gave you for your birthday? They both looked at me, puzzled, like two kids who can't remember if they fed the dog. You broke it, threw it on the floor. I reminded her. Beatrice's face fell. Oh, that old thing? I nodded, casual-like. Worth thousands, that old thing. But you wouldn't know value if it bit you in the butt. I swear, you could almost see the cogs turning in their heads as they put 2 and 2 together, finally understanding the score. Mark found his feet again, stammering, but we didn't know. Kira, please. I raised a hand to stop him. I've always had money, even when you thought I was down and out. And now, my little TV venture's making sure I've got more than I know what to do with. Mark looked like he was about to pass out, and Beatrice, she was muttering under her breath, something about not knowing. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood there. Here's how it's going to be. You two will turn around, walk out of my life, and never come back. I don't need your drama, I've got my own show for that. They didn't move, just stood there gobsmacked. So, I made it real simple for them. Out. Now. And don't bother me again. I got recipes to try and places to see, and none of them include you. Shutting the door behind them, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I went back to my kitchen, to my little empire of spices and sauces, to the future I was cooking up one dish at a time. I wasn't really mad, just done. Done with their begging, done with their games, done with anything that didn't smell like success. Or my next big meal. It felt good. No, it felt great. I glanced at my phone again, another 100 followers since I last checked. Yeah, I think I'll be alright. No need to look back when the future's this flavorful.